Aarav Sharma, a struggling Indian student chasing a future in Canada, and Victoria Hayes, a wealthy Canadian millionaire trapped in a loveless marriage, were never meant to cross paths. Yet their secret affair ignited a chain of lies, money laundering, and betrayal that ended with two bodies and a mystery still unsolved. What began as passion soon spiraled into a deadly visa scam, one that shocked an entire nation. Aarav Sharma had grown up in a modest neighborhood in northern India, where dreams of a better life abroad were often the only escape from poverty. His parents, both school teachers, had spent their savings and taken out loans to send their only son to Canada. They believed education there would guarantee him success, a respectable career, and financial security for the family. When Aarav finally received his student visa, he felt as though his life was about to change forever. Boarding the flight to Toronto, he carried not only his suitcase, but also the heavy burden of expectation. The reality he encountered was very different from what he had imagined. The city was dazzling, filled with tall glass towers, fast cars, and people moving with purpose. But beneath that glittering surface lay challenges he had not anticipated. Tuition fees were crushing, rent was sky-high, and even part-time jobs were scarce. Arif found himself juggling long hours at convenience stores and delivery services just to afford the basics, often going without sleep to meet deadlines for his coursework. He watched classmates from wealthier families breeze through college life while he counted every dollar, constantly aware that failure would mean returning home in shame. Loneliness added to his struggle. The cold Canadian winters felt alien compared to the warmth of his hometown, and the cultural divide often left him isolated. Phone calls with his parents were filled with reassurances he didn't believe himself. He told them everything was fine, hiding the truth about overdue rent and mounting debt. In his heart, he knew he could not afford to waste this chance. He needed a permanent solution, something that would secure his stay in Canada. That desire for stability would become the driving force behind every choice he made, setting the stage for what was to come. Victoria Hayes was a woman who lived behind layers of appearances. To the public, she was admired as the elegant wife of a powerful real estate developer, a mother of 2 teenagers, and a respected figure in Toronto's high society. Photographs of her smiling at charity galas and business dinners painted the portrait of a woman who had it all. Yet those who looked closer, if anyone ever dared, would have seen the quiet emptiness that had been growing inside her for years. Her marriage, built more on convenience and wealth than affection, had long turned cold. Her husband was often away, absorbed in deals and investments, and when he was home, he treated Victoria more like an accessory than a partner. Despite the sprawling mansion, luxury cars, and endless travel, Victoria felt unseen. She filled her days with philanthropy, fashion events, and managing her family's reputation, but at night she sat alone in silence, wondering how her life had become so hollow. She craved excitement, something unpredictable to cut through the monotony of her carefully constructed world. The people around her rarely offered sincerity. Most were drawn to her status rather than to her as a person. It was during one of her charitable ventures at a local university fundraiser that Victoria's path crossed with Arif's. He stood out from the polished crowd with his earnest manner and unpolished charm. Unlike the men in her circle, he had no practiced speeches, no hidden agenda of business connections. In him, Victoria saw youth, hunger, and raw ambition, qualities she had long forgotten existed. For Arif, she represented everything he lacked: influence, stability, and a lifestyle beyond imagination. Their meeting was brief, but it planted a seed of intrigue. What began as curiosity soon grew into something neither of them could control. The connection between Arif and Victoria deepened quickly, fueled by a mix of desire, secrecy, and convenience. At first, their encounters seemed harmless. Casual conversations over coffee after charity meetings, small favors that turned into invitations to private dinners. For Arif, stepping into Victoria's world was like crossing into another reality. He had never experienced the taste of fine wine, the comfort of chauffeured cars, or the feeling of being treated as someone who mattered. The loneliness and financial stress that had once consumed him began to blur under the glow of her attention. Victoria, on the other hand, was intoxicated by the energy Arif brought into her life. His youthful ambition reminded her of the woman she used to be, before the demands of marriage and wealth dulled her spirit. With him, she felt free to break the rules, to step outside the suffocating boundaries of her social position. Soon, secrecy became part of the thrill. Hotel rendezvous, weekend escapes under fabricated excuses, and late-night phone calls that had to be deleted before dawn. But their relationship was never just about passion. Arif, faced with the looming expiration of his student visa, began to view Victoria as more than a lover. He saw her as a lifeline. She had money, power, and connections that could help him secure his future in Canada. Conversations gradually shifted from love to logistics, from whispered confessions to whispered schemes. Victoria, blinded by her rebellion against her marriage, did not hesitate when Arif suggested she could use her influence to help him stay. What began as an affair of the heart turned into a calculated partnership, one that blurred the line between romance and transaction. Each believed they were in control, yet both were stepping deeper into a web from which escape would be nearly impossible. As months passed, the arrangement between Arif and Victoria grew more complicated. What once felt like a daring romance slowly transformed into a carefully concealed operation. Victoria began moving money from her personal accounts into shell businesses she had quietly set up under the names of associates. On paper, these were legitimate companies, but in reality, they were vehicles to funnel funds toward Arif's needs, rent, tuition, and the immigration lawyers who promised solutions. It was risky, but Victoria believed her wealth and influence could shield her from suspicion. The more she provided, the more Arif depended on her. Yet instead of relief, the support only deepened his anxiety. Every dollar tied him further to her. Every promise bound his future to a woman whose life was already entangled in lies. Arif began to realize that if anything went wrong, he would have nowhere to run. His desperation, once softened by her affection, started turning into a quiet unease. The first cracks appeared when Victoria's husband noticed irregularities in their financial records. Transfers that lacked explanations, sudden withdrawals, and questionable business expenses caught his attention. At the same time, government auditors flagged the shell companies for review, suspecting tax manipulation. What had been carefully hidden began to slip into the light. Victoria's once unshakable confidence gave way to fear. If the truth emerged, her reputation, her marriage, and her fortune would crumble. Arif felt the pressure too. Deportation loomed larger than ever, and he began to fear that Victoria might abandon him to save herself. Tension replaced passion. Meetings once filled with laughter turned into hushed arguments, accusations, and ultimatums. Both were locked in a scheme too big to control, each clinging to the other out of necessity rather than love. The web they had spun was beginning to unravel, strand by dangerous strand. The night of November 14th, 2019, was marked by howling winds and relentless rain hammering the empty streets. At Victoria's secluded lakeside cottage, the storm outside seemed to mirror the storm brewing inside. Arif had arrived earlier in the evening, his nerves raw and his mind clouded with panic. Investigators later learned that this meeting had been arranged to confront the growing disaster. Victoria's finances were under scrutiny. Her husband had begun pressing for answers, and Arif's visa troubles had reached a breaking point. For both, the walls were closing in. What transpired inside the cottage remains a matter of speculation. Neighbors recalled hearing raised voices carried faintly across the storm, followed by the sound of something breaking. Detectives would later find shattered glass on the living room floor, overturned furniture, and traces of blood near the fireplace. The scene suggested a violent struggle, though its cause remained unclear. Some believed Arif, terrified of losing everything, demanded more from Victoria than she could give. Others speculated that Victoria, realizing how much risk she had taken, tried to cut ties with him once and for all. By morning, Victoria's lifeless body was discovered on the floor of the cottage, showing signs of blunt force trauma. Arif was nowhere to be found. His belongings were missing, and his car had vanished from the driveway. Theories spread rapidly. Had Arif killed her in desperation and fled into the storm? Or had someone else intervened that night? Perhaps her husband, seeking revenge for betrayal? The discovery stunned the nation. Media outlets painted Arif as a dangerous con man who had seduced a wealthy woman to climb the immigration ladder. Others saw him as a victim of circumstances, a young man crushed under impossible expectations. One truth was undeniable. Their secret affair had reached its deadly climax. For weeks after Victoria's death, the search for Arif dominated headlines. His photograph was plastered across news outlets, casting him alternately as a fugitive, a murderer, or a desperate young man on the run. Police launched a manhunt, combing through Toronto's transit systems, airports, and border crossings, yet Arif seemed to have vanished. Theories multiplied with every passing day. Some believed he had escaped to the United States under a false identity. Others insisted he was hiding within Canada, aided by underground networks sympathetic to struggling international students. The mystery only deepened when, 3 weeks later, a fisherman spotted a body washed ashore along Lake Ontario. It was Arif. The autopsy revealed drowning as the cause of death, but the circumstances left more questions than answers. There were no clear signs of foul play, yet the distance between Victoria's cottage and the shoreline where he was found suggested he had traveled far before his end. Investigators struggled to determine whether he had taken his own life in despair, accidentally fallen into the lake while fleeing, or been silenced by someone who wanted loose ends tied up. Speculation swirled around Victoria's husband, whose wealth and influence gave him both motive and means. Some whispered that he had orchestrated the downfall of both his wife and her lover to protect his empire. Others argued that Arif, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, had chosen to end his life. Without definitive evidence, the case closed in a haze of uncertainty. What remained was a chilling tale of ambition, secrecy, and ruin. 2 lives, bound together by desire and desperation, had spiraled into tragedy. For many, the story became a warning about how quickly dreams can transform into nightmares when love, money, and power collide in dangerous ways. The truth, however, was buried forever beneath the storm.